Building for the future.
A financial world
that adapts and develops
to limits untold.
A chance to discuss, to inform and expand.
Our business, our focus.
As the world is at hand.
The future of money, how we use data.
Commercial enablement.
Understanding the customer.
cybersecurity,
trade, finance, digitization,
AI,
technology,
data, platforms, innovation,
geopolitical shifts,
modified foreign policies,
disrupted trade flows,
global uncertainties.
The landscape we face,
the challenge to finance,
steers our opinion
to the values that bind us.
Grow and develop.
Explore
and debate.
Transform new relationships.
build, innovate. Be bold, be creative.
smart thinking, clear purpose.
Building for the future, right here, now.
At Sibos.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the chairman of SWIFT, Yawa Shah.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to Sibos, and welcome to Toronto. This is the third time we've held Sibos in Canada, and the second time in Toronto. And it is great to be here again. We have 8,000 delegates from almost 150 countries. Sibos is the global event for our industry. And where better to have it than in Toronto, where we have 140 languages spoken, a real mix of cultures, religions, and ethnicities, a true meritocracy, and a place that really welcomes people from all places. In that same tradition, it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome our guest speaker to the Sibos stage. David McKay is President and CEO of RBC. Dave was appointed President and CEO in 2014 after an impressive career with senior roles in Canada and Japan in retail and business banking, group risk management, and corporate banking. In 2015, Dave was presented with the Retail Banker of the Year award. Dave, we are honored to have you here as our opening speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, Dave McKay.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Howard, for that introduction and for inviting me to speak this morning to you all. And welcome to Toronto, a city we're very, very proud of, and a country where we're celebrating our 150th anniversary. Now, for all of you in the room, that doesn't seem very old. We're still in elementary school, but we are very proud. And as you flew in, I think most of you flew in over the last couple of days. You flew over one of the hottest real estate markets in North America, for sure. It probably didn't look any different from the air. But for all of you who flew in yesterday, I think it was a little bit of a bumpy trip in. We're very proud of the 4 seasons that we have in Canada. We don't usually experience them all in one day, which was yesterday. So it's a real pleasure to have you here, and hopefully SWIFT has organized some birthday cake that's hopefully not too left over from our celebrations. But 2017 also marks another less happy anniversary as we reflect 10 years back to Sibos 2007. Where I'm sure many of you were in Boston, and that year you heard Bank of America's CEO Ken Lewis talk about how the industry had to rebuild the trust of its stakeholders in the industry. And in many, many ways, we're still doing that. And critical as that situation was that fall, no one could have guessed what an impact the crisis would have on the global banking industry in the years to come. Admittedly, the experience has been different across markets. And while Canadians were no way immune from that, we certainly have felt the significant regulatory impact of the crisis here in Canada. But Canada did benefit greatly from the strength and security of our financial system during that period. Since then, Canada has been consistently rated by the World Economic Forum as having one of the soundest banking systems in the world. The credit crisis made 2007 a watershed year. It altered banking for generations, but it was actually advances in technology that year that have the greatest long-term impact. Taken together with the credit crisis, these advances would lead to arguably the most disruptive and creative period ever seen in our industry. And in January 2007, Steve Jobs introduced the world to the iPhone. That same year, the term cloud computing entered fully into our consciousness. And just a few months later, Google Maps for mobile was launched, leading to the digitization of our physical world. These advances, GPS-enabled, smartphones, and the cloud, have completely altered consumers' daily lives and were responsible for a fundamental transformation in the goods and services economy. Consumers used to storing and sharing photos, videos, and music on their phones expected to be able to do the same with their money. All of us in the room have witnessed the lightning progression in those 10 years from branch to online to mobile. And many of you in the room represent the incredible blossoming of the fintech sector during that decade that has enabled people to do just that. But for all the change on the consumer side of the business, tech progress on the commercial side has been slower. Sure, there have been plenty of great examples of innovation, but there has not been the same commercial demand for mobile-first solutions. But that's changing fast. And as you know all too well, it's all down to data. Every forward-thinking business today knows that the future success will rely on its ability to collect data, to transform it to knowledge, and from there into value. Banks have a tremendously powerful opportunity to help their clients, from personal and small and medium enterprises to large corporates, collect, understand, and gain value from their data. As a CEO, I'm having conversations about data today that have been dismissed as science fiction just a few years ago. And I'm sure you're having those same conversations. In RBC, we have some particularly exciting projects underway. Within our investor and treasury services business, our advanced client experience program is growing in success, enabling asset management customers to co-develop the next generation of insight-driven products and give their feedback in real time. And we have this unique opportunity as an industry for the first time to build our business from the customer in versus the financial institution out. On the small business side, we just recently announced a partnership with a Toronto-based fintech firm called Wave, integrating their invoicing, accounting, and financial insights into our business banking platform, extending the value proposition that we have to small business and commercial businesses in Canada. But banks helping customers with data isn't new. What has changed is the exponential increase in computing power and the huge advances in AI and machine learning. With the vast explosion in data capture and the entrance of multiple players collecting that data, we need more flexibility and less friction in the way we store it and move it. Anyone who's seen the movie, one of my favorite movies, It's a Wonderful Life, with Jimmy Stewart, knows that there are three fundamental parts to banking. We move money, we store and invest it, and if we get to store it, then we have something to lend, and we lend money. The money-moving space has arguably changed the most in the last 10 years. Thousands of new entrants have entered the payment space, leading to increased fragmentation. Technology platforms have created ecosystems in work, in commerce, in entertainment, and in social connectivity. You're all familiar with them. And they gain a deep understanding of the customer's life journey. This enables them to build a more intimate relationship with a customer, anticipate their needs, while embedding the payments piece in a frictionless way. Whereas previously a bank could rely on a customer to come to them to discuss their life and business events, and their financial needs, now customers are broadcasting these events publicly. So over the next few years, banks will have to decide how they're going to compete to either bring clients into their existing channels or serve them in new channels. And this may require a rethink of their core value strategies. For banks, like every other business, the battleground will be data. Whereas in the past, banks needed economic scale to succeed, in the future, they will also need data scale. This can be gained through existing franchises or increasingly through strategic partnerships and the use of open APIs to enable them to create a platform effect, similar to the social media platforms. When it comes to treating client data appropriately, trust and security is absolutely fundamental. And I believe the banks hold an important advantage here over some of the technology platform players. However, equally, we need to recognize that players in other industries do not face the same regulatory supervision, and we need to make sure there is a level playing field. Nevertheless, we will all have to be comfortable with the manner in which we share customers' data, particularly as we look at how we can work together with other industries and partners. Blockchain could have an important role to play and could be the technology that transforms money moving and money storing. We're realistic that the technology is still in its infancy, but are excited by its potential. The opportunity to decentralize our record keeping and remove third parties could significantly reduce friction, lower costs, and increase the cadence at which we operate. We're experimenting with blockchain in a number of areas in our personal, commercial, and capital markets businesses. Last month, we announced that we'd implemented a blockchain-based shadow ledger for cross-border payments between the US and Canada. We are making a number of blockchain announcements at Sibos, including one this morning, where we announced the co-launch of the Interbank Information Network. We've been exploring blockchain's potential for a loyalty program for some time now. We're watching the performance of all our blockchain pilots very carefully, and we're aware of the need to clarify legal, regulatory, and security questions, including around the enforceability and reversibility of transactions. If blockchain is changing moving money and storing money, then artificial intelligence is doing the same to lending and investing. Canada, and right here in Toronto in particular, has an important position in the history and development of AI. Professor Jeff Hinton, regarded as the father of deep learning through his work at the University of Toronto going back to the early 80s, led a whole generation of Canadian-based AI pioneers who are at the cutting edge of research today. RBC is helping to further develop this position with the recent establishment of the RBC Research Institute, which is aimed at creating a place where PhD students can focus on world-class AI research into areas as diverse as healthcare, global warming, and of course, financial services. But it's a tough war for talent. We're competing against the likes of Google, Facebook, and Microsoft. But we know one of the keys is that academic freedom to pursue both pure and applied research is critical to attracting the best minds who will develop the game-changing breakthroughs of the future. Our aim is not only to hire the best for our bank, but also to retain the top AI talent for the broader good of our country, and retain our country's preeminent position as a leader in AI and machine learning. Beyond the longer-term projects of our research institute, we're also using AI across our bank. From implementing robotic process automation that you're all familiar with, helping predict fraud, and we've seen significant improvement in fraud prediction, supporting our algorithmic traders, and assisting our asset managers. AI really does help break down bias in many of the successful systems and processes we built. And AI's ability to look for patterns in large data sets means that it does not have the bias that even the most experienced investment manager has. And in this way, it can look for patterns that the star manager might not have seen and ultimately drive a new source of value. Another example of unlocking new sources of value is through our recently launched Nomi Find and Save product. Working with Israeli-based fintech firm Personetics, Nomi helps our customers balance managing their cash flow and savings using predictive analysis of their entire banking relationship. Examples like this, and of our blockchain work with Manifold for a rewards program, show how we're increasingly partnering with fintechs, much of it through our labs in Toronto, Orlando, and in Silicon Valley. The days when banks and fintechs looked at each other suspiciously as rivals are long gone. The relationship today is far more collaborative. More than ever, we're using small, diverse teams and agile principles in our product development, often working directly with our clients. This approach encourages non-conventional thinking and has diversity and inclusion right at its center. It's faster, more productive, and in the end game, you get what you're looking for. As the world moves forward, and more quickly, we will see a shift in skills requirements. And large organizations have to ensure that their own cadence of change keeps up. This does not come naturally for banks, so we have to work twice as hard. One of the largest jobs as a CEO is to make sure you understand the cadence of change outside your organization and the cadence of change inside your organization and adjust. I'm personally passionate about encouraging an organizational culture at RBC that's increasingly fast-paced, nimble, and client-focused. How we work is increasingly as important as what we achieve. You all know just what a profound effect smartphones and the cloud have had on how all services are delivered to consumers in the last 10 years. It's led to huge disruption and incredible creativity. AI and blockchain will further enable these advances, helping banks and their clients to derive greater value from data than ever before. In the face of greater competition, we will have to leverage all of our assets and, crucially, build from the customer in rather than the organization out, as I mentioned previously. This will require us to anticipate, adapt, and evolve further and much faster than we have in the past. Cadence is important. And in a world where barriers between industries are breaking down like never before, we have to learn from, act like, and increasingly partner with other sectors. And we'll have to think about the value and the value chains that we build for customers as distinct from what we do today and what we've done in the past. The competitor landscape may be far fiercer and more varied, but the opportunities, I really believe, are greater than ever before. So I'd sincerely like to thank Swift and Yawer for inviting me to speak this morning. I truly wish you have a great Sibos 2007. It's about connecting, it's about discussing issues. Thank you for choosing Toronto. I really do hope you enjoy the city. You'll get better weather, and you're going to have a great opportunity to talk about the key themes that are facing your industry and our industry. Thank you very much, and have a great conference.
Thank you, Dave. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to thank Dave McKay for his insightful and thought-provoking remarks. And now, let's turn to the Swift part of the opening plenary. So I want to talk to you about three things. You're all used to this, right? One, I'd like to review Swift's history and track record. Second, I want to remind you of Swift's fundamental value proposition. And third, take a look at how Swift is critical and relevant in this dynamic world of fintech and rapid evolution. So let's start by looking back and focus on the 3 indicators of Swift's performance and success. The first is growth. Message traffic has grown steadily. We've seen 9% growth over the last 5 years, and we continue with this same growth trend year to date. And Swift has also grown the breadth of its offering. It has brought new and innovative products to market in payments, securities, and financial crime compliance. Second, price reduction. Economies of scale and new revenue sources have allowed your cooperative to continue to reduce prices. Over the last 10 years, annual message traffic growth has been about 7%, and average prices have come down by 76% over the last 10 years. And at the same time, Swift has provided rebates with an accumulated value of 278 million euros. And third, stability. As a bank-owned cooperative, Swift adopts a globally neutral role. It has robust and detailed oversight of the G10 central banks, led by the National Bank of Belgium. It has solid and transparent governance of banking board members. It has a highly capable management team and a strong balance sheet. So what is the reason for this consistent success? Swift has always focused on its true north, which is building a cooperative that is owned by and dedicated to the financial community. Its strategic priorities are set by you. Swift's fundamental value proposition is to connect the community with an infrastructure that is secure, reliable, and resilient. But that's not the whole story, because Swift uses this incredible platform to add new value and to innovate, all based on your engagement and feedback. So again, 3 areas. Payments GPI, the Global Payments Innovation Initiative, is powering new developments in correspondent banking, making international payments faster, more transparent, and traceable. And Swift's technology is also enabling great strides in instant payments, first in Australia, soon in Europe, and then beyond. Securities, working with our key market infrastructures, has enabled faster and cheaper settlement in major markets. And financial crime compliance. Swift products are helping the industry combat financial crime and comply with regulations effectively and economically. In fact, we've announced today that Swift is aligning its KYC registry with the Wolfsburg due diligence questionnaire for correspondent banks. But let us not forget that across all these areas, Swift continues to be resilient and secure. It protects its own infrastructure from the threat of cyber and helps you protect yours with common standards, critical information, and effective tools. So it will come as no surprise that cybersecurity remains a key concern. The threat is here to stay, and it is essential that we get ahead of it. 11,000 institutions are connected to the Swift network, but they each choose to do business with each other on a bilateral basis. As you all know, I'm fond of saying that Swift is like Facebook, and that you have to befriend the other to do business. Now, with the Swift Customer Security Program, Swift is supporting its users implement cyber defenses. In the first half of this year, Swift rolled out a customer security controls framework. This ensures a security baseline for the community. We've asked customers to attest against a set of mandatory controls by the end of this year so that counterparties can make informed decisions. In addition, Swift has been helping customers in securing their own operating environments. We've rolled out new security controls, security guidance, and software updates. We've established new teams to provide alerts and forensics to support customers. And we have set up a dedicated customer security intelligence team to investigate reported cases, share intelligence of these threat vectors. This helps protect our users. Now, the SWIFT ISAC portal, which was launched in May, makes this information sharing even more accessible. And within this context, I like to raise two topics. One is that the consumption of these attestations will also be a critical next step in helping banks and the industry protect itself. The global transaction banks, a primary consumer of these self-attestations, are working on incorporating this new information into their risk management and counterparty review process. The second is recovery. So far, I've spoken about protection and detection. Recovery is just as important. There's increasing evidence that when banks act with speed and diligence, the net losses the victims suffer can be reduced dramatically. It takes all of us to counter this cyber threat. All the more reason the banks and the industry have to work together. So, what else is going on? There's the pace of technology innovation. There are investments being made into fintechs and startups. We have cryptocurrencies with some very interesting valuations. And we live in a world of increasing geopolitical division. A question that can be asked is, can a bank-owned cooperative like SWIFT still be agile? So let me reassure you with a resounding answer, yes. First, SWIFT has scale and reach. It connects the industry in a way no other organization can. It is a truly global organization connecting more than 11,000 institutions in banking, securities, market infrastructures, and cooperatives in 200-plus countries and territories. Second, SWIFT has the ability to execute with depth. We've demonstrated this again and again. Witness the KYC registry, which now has 4,200 users. And through GPI, which, let me remind you, did not exist 2 years ago, is now active along 100 corridors. And there is the connectivity for Target 2 securities, for which SWIFT now carries 95% of all message traffic. And finally, when the need arises, SWIFT acts with speed. The customer security program, which has already done so much to shore up the security of the industry, shows that SWIFT can move fast and mobilize its community effectively to face new challenges. Your cooperative has run more than 200 work sessions in all countries around the world in the last few months. It has engaged with more than 14,500 people to explain the self-attestation process. And just to remind you, all of this and the use of the self-attestation registry is without charge, in line with the nature of your cooperative. But let me not paint too rosy a picture. SWIFT's board and management are aware they need to be even more vigilant and nimble than ever before in the area of fintech, regtech, and DLT. Let me give you examples of 3 areas to look forward to in the very near future. GPI, continuing the momentum to provide speed, traceability, and transparency. From a SWIFT perspective today, we see that a message from one bank to another move in 3 seconds for a price of 3 cents. GPI is gaining momentum. Later this year, all banks on the network will be equipped to receive GPI messages as we start to roll it out for the entire community. Gottfried will talk a lot more about this, but make no mistake. The banking community needs to move rapidly in this space. Managing fraud. By this time next year, you will have a sender payment fraud tool. This will be an easy installation and allow you to set the parameters such as new beneficiary, time of day, amount, and have it alert you for out-of-bounds activity. This tool will add to your arsenal of preventative measures. In addition, the global transaction banks can, as they consume your CSP self-attestations, leverage your use of this tool to enhance your mitigating controls. And this leverages the highly successful work SWIFT has done in sanction screening. Financial crime compliance. Look for this space to further leverage the KYC registry, as well as the comprehensive suite of products in the areas of sanction, AML, and analytics. This whole suite provides insights that are bilateral, repeat bilateral, with tools and capabilities. So SWIFT continues to have the momentum. That's what makes it so exciting. It continues to have your engagement and trust. We do not take this for granted. We understand that we have to earn the right to be your bank-owned cooperative every single day. And we fully intend to do just that, as we have done for the past 40 years. Your board that you elect continues to govern your cooperative with discipline, transparency, and rigor. The SWIFT management team continues to be well-led, skilled, and aligned to your goals. I have no doubt that the market, the environment, and the overseers will all continue to demand a lot from SWIFT, as you should. I remain dedicated to serving you as your chairman of your cooperative. I consider it an honor and privilege to do so. Thank you very much. And I welcome to the podium SWIFT CEO Gottfried Leibrandt.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Yauer. And thank you, Toronto, for hosting us yet again for what promises to be a wonderful week. And yet again, indeed, we were in Boston in 2007, but of course we were here in Toronto in 2011. How many of you were here in 2011? Okay, we get some refresh. Well, I thought that'd be interesting. We talked about all the changes in retail, but in the wholesale transaction banking space, you will all agree with me that the past 6 years since that last Sibos has been pretty quiet and boring. Not much has happened in wholesale, right? Just kidding, of course. We have seen, it took a bit longer to hit the wholesale transaction banking space, but we have seen a staggering amount of change in our space. And I'd like to take you through some of that. And maybe start with geopolitics, where the world really is a different place. 4 years ago in Dubai, we had this gentleman as our closing speaker, Ian Bremmer, and he talked about a G0 world, where there is no clear leader anymore, and it's pretty much people for themselves or shifting alliances, etc. And of course, he has been totally right on that one. He made 2 other predictions that really didn't come to fruition. He said yeah, this event wouldn't really happen, Brexit. Well, it did. And there's another tiny event which he didn't really see coming. He solidly predicted that Hillary Clinton would be the president to the south of this place. Played out a little differently. So geopolitics has been a very interesting space to watch. We are now seeing the world's most foremost economic power canceling any treaty they can think of, perhaps by tweet. We are seeing Cold War generals dusting off scenarios, or generals dusting off scenarios from the Cold War. And indeed, if the fall of the Berlin Wall was the end of history, I think history is back with a vengeance. And that creates a very interesting space for the financial industry that now has to operate globally in a fragmenting world. And banks and market infrastructures find themselves dealing with often contradictory requirements in terms of data privacy, data location, sanctions, offshoring regimes, etc. Quite an interesting space to operate in. So that's geopolitics, challenging. And then, of course, there is cyber. Clearly, as we said last year on stage, the Bangladesh bank fraud brought the threat of cyber right to the doorstep of our industry, wholesale transaction banking. But of course, it's much broader than that. In the past 6 years alone, I can mention Target, Sony, Equifax, Yahoo, as some examples of really big frauds with real damage that happened. 150 million credit cards in a single sweep, 1.5 billion email addresses and passwords, 120 million new virus variants uploaded every year on VirusTotal. The numbers are really, really big. And on top of that, it's innovating and changing. I mean, who would have thought that we would see fake news combined with election campaigns, cryptocurrencies with ransomware, weapon-grade malware developed by the world's foremost secret agencies, stolen, leaked on the internet, and then sold to the highest bidder on the dark web. It really makes you want to cry. And then, of course, technology, as acknowledged by the previous speakers. 6 years ago, Uber was primarily operating in San Francisco. That was their only market. Artificial intelligence was something out of the science fiction books. I thought I'd bring back this picture that you may or may not recognize. But the truth is that now artificial intelligence is embedded in real business processes. So we have that. Cloud computing 6 years ago was just a tiny cloud on the horizon, no pun intended. Alipay and Tencent were known mainly in China. And what a difference 6 years makes, right? Right now, they're on the world stage. The market valuation of Google, Alipay, Tencent, Yahoo, Amazon, or no, forget Yahoo, Amazon, they're all bigger than almost any bank on the planet. And yes, we can talk about cooperation, but they're very interested in your customers, their transactions, and their data. Thank you. And oh yes, of course. Who knows what this is? It's not a pony stable. It is a Bitcoin mine in Outer Mongolia. And as Jouwer said, that's an interesting phenomenon. 6 years ago, a Bitcoin was worth $1 to $5. I think it's about 1,000 times that now. Interesting valuations, as Jouwer remarked. I tend to be Dutch about these things, so I thought I'd show you this one. And I'll give you a hint. We like flowers. And for a very brief moment in the 17th century, these things were worth as much as a house on the canals in Amsterdam, for a very brief moment. So yes, technology, cyber, geopolitics. You'd almost think, you know, if you're paranoid, you would think that the politicians, the cyber criminals, and Silicon Valley are all after the financial industry. Now, there's a saying, only the paranoid survive. Well, if that's true, then the financial industry must be paranoid, because it is surviving and doing well, thank you. And why is that? That is, of course, by heeding the lesson of the opening speaker. Cadence, evolving as fast as the world outside. The financial industry has been evolving, adapting, and changing and innovating at breakneck speed. And we, as Swift, have tried to help them with that and play our part in helping the industry, or at least our industry, the global transaction industry, help them do that. So let me give some examples of that. Of course, there is the security, the cybersecurity, customer security program. And indeed, I hope you're all familiar with this one, because we used it in all the country workshops for the cybersecurity program. Repeat after me. It was about securing your own environment. It's the castle on top. Really check your counterparties. Those are the people on the lower right hand. And share your information with the community so we can all learn from events as they happen and defend against it. It's been a huge program, a big effort for Swift and the community. But I can say a lot has been done, and of course a lot remains to be done, but we're having a real impact on the security of our users. The aim was to turn a potential lethal threat into a manageable nuisance. I think we're well on our way to do that. Fingers crossed. So that's the threat of cyber. But it's not just, banks are doing not just that. At the same time, they've embedded all sorts of financial crime controls in their processes, financial crime in general. And again, we've been helping them with that, a lot of that over the past 6 years. We now have the KYC platform 4,000 banks, over 4,000 banks on it. That's half of all our users. Sanction screening, 750 users on it. Neither of these services existed 6 years ago. And it's also interesting that they're both platforms. We've taken the approach of developing industry platforms, and that was also a point picked up by the earlier speakers. And these days, you might think that Silicon Valley invented platforms. It's always about platforms, Uber as a platform, Facebook as a platform, etc. And we now even have platforms to go to Mars. It's interesting that Silicon Valley wants to go to Mars and not Venus. There may be an issue. Anyway. But of course, the financial industry knew about the power of platforms long ago. And in fact, SWIFT is the prime example of a platform of the financial industry, and also the power that if you manage a platform well, how far it can go and how it can evolve. And there's more, of course. I can mention real-time payments, where the industry is now building platforms across the world. In Australia, that will go live in a few months, and that we are supporting. The whole concept didn't exist 6 years ago. T2S, as was being mentioned, 6 years ago, we were just bidding for connectivity. Now it's fully up and running, live. We've finished the final migration, and everything is running. But of course, I want to talk more extensively about my favorite platform, the one I'm most passionate about, and that is the Global Payments Innovation Platform, GPI. Why am I passionate about that? Well, part of that because it's personal. And for that, I have to take you back to another Sibos, Sibos 2004 in Atlanta. I was not yet with SWIFT. In fact, I had vaguely heard of SWIFT. I was there still as a consultant. But I did hear the opening speaker ask the audience, why does it take so long to make a payment, and why can I track a package through FedEx or UPS, and why can I not track my payment as it goes through the payment system? So a year later, I had joined SWIFT, and I asked the same question. I said, why can't we track a payment? What's so hard about that? And we sat down, we talked to users, I talked to the people inside SWIFT, and it really turned out that at the time, with the technology we had then, it was almost impossible to do. You had to link 103s and all these things. So I was really glad that when 2 years ago, we met with the big transaction banks in Singapore, and we decided to give it another try. And it turns out that with today's technology, it is possible. It is possible to track a payment, make it move very fast through the system, and provide clarity upfront about the cost and fees of that payment. And we've done that. We've implemented it now. We have really turbocharged the rails, and the result is GPI. And I can only say, for something that didn't exist 2 years ago, it has got incredible momentum. To date, being live, we've processed over 2 million payments on GPI. We do tens of thousands of payments every day, and that number is rising extremely fast. And it's not a swell, no, it's a tsunami. We really are taking it. A small pun. But perhaps more importantly, there's real customer value. And at the end of the day, this has to be about value to the customers. If you look at the throughput time of payments, practically all GPI payments are debited to the final account in a day, and more than half of them in a matter of hours or even minutes. They are really fast. And our corporate customers, or the bank's corporate customers, they love it, and they're actively asking for it at banks. And at the end of the day, that is the real proof of the pudding. So that's one I feel passionate about, and I'm really happy about here at Sibos. And we're just getting started on what I call correspondent banking 2.0, because with what we now have in place with the tracker and the basic infrastructure of GPI, a lot is possible. And I'll sketch a few of the things that you can do with it, and we're looking at one. By having that unique identifier in a payment, you can attach all sorts of information to a transaction as it wishes around the globe. Invoice information, purchase orders, all that stuff. Really have rich information around the payment. That's one thing. The second, it now really becomes possible to link real-time payments in one country to a real-time platform in another country and have them linked through correspondent banking. And that way you can have near real-time cross-border payments with all the benefits of the correspondent banking system as you know it, deep liquidity, compliance and controls. and universal reach, being able to reach everyone. So that's the second one, the real-time payments. And the third one is also important. We've chosen a fairly open approach and open architecture for it, and that allows us to incorporate new technologies. So for example, we now have a proof of concept to use distributed ledger technology, mentioned by the opening speaker, to do nostro-vostro reconciliation for GPI payments. So it really allows us to bring on board new technologies and new concepts as they come. So that's GPI. Now, it's an example of how the banking system as a whole can really adapt and change, and that is a very good thing, because that will be needed. I can make one prediction here, that is that the next 6 years will see as much change, and perhaps even more, as the previous years. So when we gather again in 6 years, the world will be a different place, and the banks and SWIFT will have to continue to adapt, and I would say we're going to have to hit warp speed to do that. It really is going to be fast. So what better place to discuss all of that than here at Sibos? As you may expect from us, we have put together a busy program that allows you to discuss all these themes, interesting speakers. I'll mention two here. Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who really needs no further introduction, and then Satya Nadella of Microsoft, the closing speaker. Tim Berners-Lee is a breakfast with him tomorrow, on Tuesday. It's an interesting choice and an interesting combination, these two, because Sir Tim is the inventor of the World Wide Web, which many predicted would be the end of Microsoft. And yet both of them are thriving and surviving, and that's in the brutal tech industry. So I am really looking forward to hearing from both of these gentlemen. So thank you, stay paranoid, and have a great Sibos.